morning, everyone. Good morning. You're here because you signed up for the lead session titled 9/11 Recollections. Talk a little bit more about what we'll do today. For some of you, it might be your first lead session at Bethel Park High School. LEAD stands for Learning Enrichment Activity Days, or Leadership Enrichment Activity Days. Okay, so there's great opportunities here at the high school to learn more about something, learn a skill. So today is focused on 9/11. Very powerful quote from this day. There's many powerful quotes, but President George Bush, former President George Bush, when he addressed the nation, he said, "These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve." Thought that to be very powerful. How Americans, when bad stuff happens, wars, depression, they always fight on and, be better than the next day. So, as you may know, Mr. Fozzie mentioned this morning on the announcements, September 11th, 2001 was when a series of coordinated terrorist attacks were carried out by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda on the United States. On that morning, 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial planes. So there's Flight 11. That was the first plane that was hijacked and crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46. After that, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, the U.S. Department of Defense headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. And United Airlines Flight 93 is when the passengers overpowered the hijackers, causing the plane to crash in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So it hits very close to home. And at this time in the day, passengers had learned of the hijacked flights, so they took charge to, in their bravery, make sure that the plane could not harm more Americans. Sort of the reason why I wanted to have this lead session is many people who were alive at the time vividly remember where they were at the exact moment on September 11th. This past summer, I vacationed to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Has anyone ever been there? Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Yeah, lots to do there. There's one museum called Alcatraz East. Alcatraz East is like a crime artifacts museum where you can learn about different crimes. It has an exhibit where visitors can share where they were on 9/11, and I was really taken back by all the pieces of paper, people sharing where they were in that exact moment on 9/11. So seeing that, it's something that really has a profound impact on people who were alive at the time. You may have heard from your parents, family members about 9/11. So why I wanted to have this is to, first and foremost, honor and remember the victims of 9/11. And also share the profound impact these events had on America through both first-hand accounts. So first-hand accounts are people who were there. And also share some of the local history. We call these second-hand accounts. These are the accounts of the people who were not there, meaning at New York City or Arlington, Virginia, but people who learned of the attacks and the impact it had on them and the impacts it had on America moving forward. There are a lot of impacts 9/11 had. So just to share some of the local history, I went to Bethel Park High School when it was the outdoor campus. So I wanted to learn what my teachers, how they were impacted by it at the time when it was breaking news. All right, so start with me. Where was I on September 11, 2001? I was in the 4th grade at Harrison Elementary School in Baldwin. Since I was in 4th grade, I was 9 years old. The details are really unclear. It's hard for me to remember exactly what happened. But I remember my teacher at the time, she received a phone call and she announced to the class that 2 planes hit buildings in New York. So you could tell my teacher she was really affected by this. I do remember feeling very sad, and that was a pervasive feeling of sadness. I remember my teacher kept receiving phone calls of students to go home early. And truthfully, I was waiting for that phone call, being my parents, to pick me up from school early because I was scared and, yeah, I didn't know what was happening. I remember getting off the bus at the end of the day. I remember running home because I felt America was under attack and a plane at any moment would attack my street in Baldwin. So I was young, yes, but I knew America was at war. So I sent out a Google form just to see what some of the staff here at Bethel Park experienced. Some of these staff were working at Bethel Park at the time, and some were not. Herr Tobias, as you may know, he teaches German here at Bethel Park. He was my German teacher for 4 years. At the time, he was working in Building 2, and a student came into his classroom and told him that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. Like many people, he didn't really understand exactly what that meant until he saw live reports afterwards. Continuing on with Herr Tobias's inputs, I just underlined some things. I'm not going to read it word for word. But he was working at Bethel Park High School at the time. And the way you received information was a lot different. Okay, didn't have iPhones to check Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, TikTok. Okay, didn't have all that. So if you've ever had Herr Tobias, he is really dedicated to what goes on in his classroom, okay, making sure that students are truly learning German. But he assumed, like many, that it was a small plane, such as a Cessna or Piper Cubs, that hit one of the Twin Towers. He thought it was this great accident, okay? But after his planning period, he went up to the Building 2 office, where he saw one of the towers with billowing smoke while a news reporter recounted what was going on, what they saw. It was breaking news at the time, so when you're a reporter, you're really not supposed to speculate on what you think happened. You're supposed to tell what did happen or what they are seeing. So he, like many staff members at Bethel Park at the time, were glued to the TV. He remembers my former social studies teacher, Jerry Miller, standing next to him saying, "I think we're going to war," when the second plane hit. More of his inputs, he saw the significance of the day, so he postponed the day's lessons and turned on the old box TV. Maybe you've seen one of the old TVs. And he, again, saw the significance of it as like an equivalent of Pearl Harbor. And he felt that nothing he taught that day, being German, would be nearly as important as the events were happening. So they watched in horror as the towers collapsed on television. He lived in Baldwin, in an area where a lot of planes flew, so the sound of silence, okay, no planes flying, all planes were grounded that day and a number of days afterwards, so he thought that was really unusual or eerie, sound of silence. Moving on, Mrs. Bruckner, anybody have her for gym class? I think I have. Mrs. Bruckner? Yeah. So she was in college at the time in her apartment getting ready for class. And what she recalls is the entire town of her college shut down. Her classes were canceled and restaurants had been closed. Her dad really traveled for work. And at the time he was in the plane, and the plane was taxiing the runway when his flight was canceled. So to her relief, in calling her mom, she found out that the flight was canceled and her dad went home. Mr. Fink, history teacher, he was at home watching the events unfold on television. Also, I'll mention this later, Ken Waldy, he went to Bethel Park High School, and he was unfortunately killed on Flight 11. And Mr. Fink also notes that his brother joined New York Police Department after the 9/11 attacks. Mrs. Janai, she was in the preschool room at the old Bethel Park High School. She notes that there was no TV in her classroom. But again, students told her about the event, that it was happening. But again, information was not easily accessed in that time, and she did not learn the true gravity of 9/11 and the impacts it would have until much later on in the evening. Mr. Short at the time was working at Ace Hardware on South Park Road. When he was working, a customer came in, said that a plane hit the World Trade Center. Moments later, a second customer came in, said that a second plane hit the other one. And his boss asked him to run home since he lived close and get a TV because this was breaking news. People wanted to know what happened. It was as if the world stopped and watched because they just could not believe the horror of what was happening. People locally was very scared because of the UPMC building. That's a good point Mr. Short makes because it was one of the tallest buildings in the eastern part of the United States. Mr. Alamein, he was at the Bethel Park High School campus in Spanish class when Mr. Barkley, who taught at Bethel Park High School, got a call or email about it, which prompted him to turn on the classroom television like many classrooms across America. Students were watching it live on TV, and once the second plane hit, we knew America was under attack, Mr. Alamein says, and they watched as the North and South Towers collapsed on television. Mr. Alamein continued, we were all in shock, we were scared. At Bethel Park High School on September 11th, students were sent home from the school not too long after the towers collapsed. It was a very scary day, and once he got home, he watched the news with his parents. Mrs. Chapin, she was in her junior year of college at Penn State. At the time, she was listening to the radio as part of her morning routine. And the DJs on the show announced in a joking way that a plane had flown into the Twin Towers, so not realizing the seriousness of the situation. Class was canceled again, and she went to the student hub because there were a lot of TVs. And she had friends living in New York City, so she felt the need to check in on them. Mr. Zender was in the 7th grade at Ambridge Junior High when an announcement came over the loudspeaker for all teachers to check their emails. Was not able to watch it at the time, but saw replays of it when I got to the house and did see the buildings fall live. Anything additional? So the social studies teacher at his school had a family member who was a New York fireman, and we were all worried about him, Mr. Zender says. He ended up being okay, but it taught him that we should appreciate the military and first responders who put their well-being aside to help others. 9/11, there was a terrible terrorist attack on our country. There's many stories of heroes, okay? First responders such as firefighters, police officers, people who are working in these buildings helping others get to safety. There's really good documentaries that the National Geographic has to talk about it. Mrs. Serena, she is the speech teacher here at Bethel Park High School. She was working in her speech pathology externship at the time. One of her patients had on Good Morning America, and daytime television such as Good Morning America, other shows such as the Today Show, you could see like the footage before, it's happy and it's quite eerie how different things were before, and then it turned to the breaking news of these terrorist attacks, which we will show if we have time later. Mrs. Serena said everyone was in the facility was worried and concerned about the patients and how to keep them safe. The phone lines were down. The staff there were panicked, and everyone was trying to keep the patients calm at the facility. So this concern was shared by many people across America. Didn't know what to do, just watched in horror. Mrs. Ray, she was working at Cal U, my alma mater. She said that someone had come into the dean's office when with the news that the first plane hit the World Trade Center. We were watching shortly after the first plane hit. So as you can see here, a common theme, people stopped what they were doing and they turned on the news. The whole thing was just so unbelievable. I was worried because I had friends in the DC area, Mrs. Ray continues. Again, everyone in the university was released to go home. Mr. Vick, at the time, he was teaching at Independence Middle School. He was on his plan period, visiting Mr. Richard and Mr. Spitznagel in the tech ed room. We were watching the aftermath of the first plane. Many people were afraid and crying, watching the breaking news. You could infer that there were great casualties, injuries. So yeah, it sparked really emotional responses from people. Afterwards, he notes that him and his wife started looking for houses in Bethel Park. Mr. Plummer, he was asleep in his bed. His brother woke him up and watched the news in stunned silence. This actually prompted him to become a volunteer firefighter, which is a story of many Americans at the time. It prompted them to enlist in the service, military service, and also as volunteer firefighters. He felt that he couldn't just sit there and watch. He wanted to honor those brave firemen, women, first responders, to honor them by taking up the axe and hose, meaning joining the volunteer fire company. Mrs. Carroll, she was in Ocean City, Maryland at the time. She mentions her dad was outside when someone had told her to turn on the TV because a plane had just flew into the World Trade Center. She watched live on air as the second plane hit. And if you've ever been to Ocean City, Maryland, you know that planes fly up and down the coast all day with advertisements, sightseeing tours. But she makes mention that it was eerily quiet because there were no planes. All planes were grounded. And she noted a military plane flew by and everyone's eyes turned in the sky because there hadn't been air traffic, but seeing a military plane, yeah, shocking. Okay, so Ken Waldy, every year a memorial scholarship is awarded in his memory. So just to make mention of who Ken Waldy was, he was, from my research and understanding, a great person. He participated in several activities, including track, student council, junior class president, NHS. He was most involved with the swim team, in which his team earned the WPIAL Championship at one point. Yeah, so Ken Waldy, again, he was on Flight 11, and a scholarship is awarded every year in his name. I think somewhere close to $100,000 have been awarded so far, and this is a continuing thing. If you're interested in applying for this scholarship, I encourage you to take the opportunity to do so. You have to, of course, apply and I think write an essay. The link right here for you, Kenny, you can go to apply for that scholarship. Ken Waldy in his memory. I shared this presentation out with you all. So at this link, you can find what's called History's First Draft. So this is the New York Times on September 12th, 2001. Having this major terrorist attack on the United States, people had a lot of questions, naturally, and they wanted to find out answers. So this is History's First Draft. It states what was known at the time, and now, of course, we know much more about September 11th and the activities, what took place and the details. But if you're interested, I encourage you to read History's First Draft, the New York Times. So President Bush, former President Bush, you may have heard where he was at the time of the September 11th attacks. This video does a good job of telling that.
9/11 would become a date to remember. It's the job of a president is to protect the American people from harm. And some presidents don't need to worry about that, and some do. And it turns out I was one that did.
My assistant came in and said, a plane is at the World Trade Center. And I said, well, that's a strange accident. And I called the president. Initially, we thought maybe a small plane of some kind. And he said, well, keep me posted.
He'd been told that a small twin-engine prop plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. You know, oh, that's a horrible accident. I was concerned, but I did not think of it as a national security threat.
I remember when he came in, even as a 7-year-old, you know who the president is, right? And I remember like even feeling like that young feeling like kind of like starstruck and giddy, like I'm going to Disney World or something. And I put my hand over my heart. Like you know, when you think about patriotic things when you're that little, you know, you do the Pledge of Allegiance every day, and I literally put my hand over my heart.
I asked my communicators if they could find a television. And at about 1 minute after 9, they came back in with a television set. So we brought CNN up. I was calling the White House Situation Room to talk to my senior duty officer. So I was chatting with him on the handset and watched the television as the rest of the country was watching the television at 9:03 when the second aircraft impacted into the second World Trade Center tower.
When the second plane hit, there was an audible gasp of air in the room. Some people put their hand on their chest. It was two realizations, right? One, that the immediate death toll, and then the fact that this was an attack on America.
More! Yes, more. Get ready. Light! Yes, light. Get ready.
It hits me as I'm standing there next to the president to the left that the president's the only one that doesn't know the second plane has hit the building.
I had to deliver a message that the president didn't expect to hear and was almost unbelievable. But it also literally was the message he had to hear, whether he wanted to or not.
Andy Card comes up to behind me and says, second plane has hit the second tower, America's under attack. And I'm watching the child read. And then I see the press in the back of the room beginning to get the same message I just got. And I could see the horror etched on the face of the news people who had just gotten the same news. During a crisis, it's really important to set a tone and not to panic. And so I waited for the appropriate moment to leave the classroom. I didn't want to do anything dramatic. I didn't want to, lurch out of the chair and scare the classroom full of children. And so I waited.
Try it again. Get ready for the beginning of that sentence. Get ready.
She played with her boat in her house.
Go on.
I was studying him intently, and his mouth was kind of drawn and tight, and there was almost for just a brief moment, sort of a startled look in his eyes, and also a weightiness to him, if you will. I could tell he was really focused on trying to get through that event.
Try that again.
You're literally seeing the mindset of the President of the United States play out on TV. Everything about what he thought he was about as a president is changing right in front of you. We hear about the great wartime leaders, Churchill, Roosevelt, others, days, if not weeks, to process and gird themselves for what was ahead. This is all happening in real time.
This is when George Bush addressed the nation later that evening.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
This is footage from the Today Show on the morning of September 11th. Again, don't have time to watch the whole thing, but again, you could tell they had like a scheduling programming. I'm not sure in particular what they were talking about, but there's an eeriness to the footage before the attacks, and then when they learned of the breaking news, it shifted to footage of that.
Howard Hughes lived the American dream. He was wealthy beyond belief, dated beautiful movie stars, and made record-breaking flights. But the man who could have it all for years just wanted to be left alone. Because of that, much of his life has remained a mystery until now. Author Richard Hack uncovers America's first billionaire in his new book, simply called Hughes. He was known as a great ladies' man. However, you say perhaps that was a bit of a myth, that he was not all that great a lover. He dated Katharine Hepburn.
Yes, he certainly did. She moved in with him at one point, brought the maid, the butler, and the 3 dogs.
Why did she move out? What happened between the two of them?
Well, she found out that he was dating Betty Davis. That sort of puts a crimp on things, you know, when you think you're the only one. He proposed to all these ladies, mind you.
And then they'd all find out that he had somebody else on the side.
When Ginger Rogers found out, she threw a bag full of jewelry at him, only to learn the next day that he also repossessed her station wagon that he had given her.
As Matt just mentioned, we have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City. It happened just a few moments ago, apparently. We have very little information available at this point in time, but on the phone, we do have Jennifer Oberstein, who apparently witnessed this event. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, can you please tell me what you saw and to give me any information about what's going on there?
Yes, I have to tell you, it's quite terrifying. I'm in shock right now. I came out of the subway at Bowling Green. I was heading to work in Battery Park at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I come out, and I heard a boom, looked up, and there was a big ball of fire. I'm now looking north at the World Trade Center, and it is the left twin tower if I'm looking north. I'm in Battery Park right now, and you can hear the fire engines and the emergency crews behind me, and it is unbelievable. When the fire first burst, it was a... Hello?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
In air like I've never seen before, and as you know, I used to work in news. I've never seen any fire like this in the air, and the pieces of the building were flying down. It looks like it's like the top, I can't even tell you, maybe 20 floors. Intense smoke. It's horrible. I can't even describe it.
This is about the heroes that day. If you could please play this video.
This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there.
A plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City.
We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft.
Oh my God, another plane has just hit. It hit another building, flew right into the middle of it.
It's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. I just wanted you to know that I love you always.
I think we have a terrorist act of proportions that we cannot begin to imagine at this juncture.
If a popular novelist sat down and wrote a novel, people wouldn't buy this book because it would be so outrageous. This could never happen.
I don't know what to tell young people about that day. I know when I die, the first thing I'm going to ask St. Peter is like, hey, what happened? How did this happen? Because I still have questions. That was my day off. It was a beautiful day, you know, really beautiful blue skies.
It was going to be the morning of the mayoral primaries. They switched me to do election duty that day.
Like every other morning, we were sitting around the table just going over what was going on with the kids, with the family.
I was in my bathroom taking a shower, and I had a window that faced south, and I heard what I thought was an explosion.
At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the World Trade Center North Tower, Building 1. It was one of 4 planes hijacked by 19 al-Qaeda terrorists that day. At first, it seemed a tragic accident, an airplane off course.
As I'm watching this, trying to figure out, do I have to go to work? The second plane hit, and I saw it on TV. And that was it.
And all I seen was this huge fireball coming out of Tower 2, out of the South Tower. And for a second, I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe just the building blew up.
I ran downstairs, and I'm looking south, and both towers are on fire. And it was stunning.
With the second catastrophic strike, it became clear that the country was under attack. New York City mounted its largest rescue effort in history, dispatching more than 2,000 firefighters, medical workers, and police officers to Lower Manhattan.
It was a little hard getting through the streets because there was debris all over. Stuff that had come out of the building from the plane hitting it.
You gotta remember, the North Tower is fully engulfed. It's people are jumping out of the windows, and you can hear them hitting the deck. there was these popping sounds going off. We realized it was people that were either jumping off the building or falling out of the building. I did not look. I was not going to look. I'm very protective of my psyche. I only need to see what I need to see in situations like this. But you couldn't close your ears.
Rescue workers rushed in to help the more than 16,000 people still inside, putting their own lives on the line. Officers Bill Biuri and Mark DeMarco and their team entered the North Tower, Tower 1.
We ended up at Stairwell C, and we started our climb up.
We're running into other people. I said, just follow the wall down. When you get outside, I said, try not to panic. I said, but run. I said, get away from the side as fast as you can. And all of a sudden, the lights went out, the building went dark, ceiling panels were falling down.
It sounded like a freight train going by.
And the whole place was shaking like an earthquake. With this, our radio started getting very active.
15 floors down from the top. It looks like it's totally glowing red. On the inside, it's inevitable because I don't think this has too much longer to go.
At 9:59 a.m., the 110-story South Tower, Tower 2, crashed down in just 10 seconds.
And that's when a little bit of shock started setting in, because we knew what these buildings looked like. We knew how long it took them to put them up. And for something like that to come down in a matter of seconds, it was just mind-boggling. You couldn't wrap your head around it. One of the officers that was outside, he put over the radio, he said, everybody who was in Tower 1, evacuated immediately. Get the hell out of there.
DeMarco and Biuri, along with Sergeant Michael Curtin and Officer John Delara, saved civilians from certain death, ushering them from the stairway and lobby. The men then made their way from the North Tower to the adjacent building number 6. There, they met McNally and his partner Claude Danny Richards. Then, only moments later.
One plane colliding with one twin tower. Oh my God.
It's collapsing. It's collapsing. Roll your left. Watch out. It's collapsing. I get it. The North Tower's coming down.
Oh my God.
And we put our heads down, and we held on to each other, and we tried to become as small as we possibly could. And I just laid there, and I remember saying goodbye to my wife and kids.
I remember seeing all 4 of my kids, one after another. I had time to get out one prayer, and it was, dear God, if you're going to take me, please make it fast. You know, that's how scared I was. I was terrified. I remember saying to myself, I said, is this death? Is this what death is? And I was waiting for like a piece of steel to come through my back and out my chest or something.
The 110-story North Tower landed on Building 6, blasting a crater through it, only a few feet from where McNally, Biuri, and DeMarco were huddled.
You've probably seen the large cloud dust. Well, we were in it. I had a respirator, and that became very clogged very quickly, and I couldn't breathe. And you start really panicking when you can't breathe. All of a sudden, it was silent, and you're like, wow, I survived. I started moving my fingers and my toes, and I said, I guess that's a good sign. I figured I got my limbs, and I figured I was alive. I don't know how long we were there or how long we were in that spot. But we ended up getting up, and we all met up. Visibility was still horrible. Little patches of fire were breaking out. And I said to myself, the building collapse didn't kill me. I said, I'm going to burn to death. Bill Biuri yells out, he goes, I think I found a way out. I think there's a hole over here, a hole in the building. And we got this conga line, and we're going to try to get out. It was Mark DeMarco, me, and Billy behind me. You could still see our handprints on the wall as we were guiding ourselves blindly. We were able to climb out the windows out to the outside mezzanine level, which was facing West Street. The bridge was all collapsed. Everything was dead silent. No cars, no birds, nothing.
McNally, Biuri, and DeMarco searched in vain for 3 NYPD officers who moments before had been right there with them. A search that would continue for months on end.
They couldn't find Mike Curtin, John Delara, or Danny Richards. And we didn't find them until the following spring. They were buried under the sheer weight of the World Trade Center. And they couldn't have been more than 20 feet behind us when the tower came down. And that was the focus of the rest of my days there, was making sure that people knew exactly where I thought these guys were, you know, so that we could recover their bodies.
And to this day, I don't understand why I'm still here. There's a guiltiness about it. Because there's a lot of them. They were more talented. They're just better people than me. They didn't make it. I was able to come home. I was able to see my family. I was able to see my kids grow up.
I'm fortunate, I'm lucky. You know, I thank God that I'm still breathing, but I inhaled a lot of stuff, and, you know, sometimes that I don't think about it, but I know that there might be a ticking time bomb in my chest, you know?
To this day, only 60% of the victims have been identified, most only through traces of DNA, leaving more than 1,000 families without any remains of their loved ones to bury and mourn.
I miss my friends, even the ones who survived. They're not the same. There's a lot of guys who are coming down sick with cancers that are horrific.
I think about 9/11 every day. I mean, it's not. It doesn't consume me where I feel I need to go see a shrink or seek help somewhere. I just don't ever want to forget it. I don't forget it. I wear a memorial bracelet with the guys who perished that day. Sergeant John Coughlin, Sergeant Michael Curtin, Sergeant Rodney Gillis, Detective Joseph Vigiano, Police Officer John DeLara, Police Officer Vincent Dance.
NYPD issued Truck 7, 9/11, 01. And there's only been one time that this hasn't been on my arm. In 2013, I had open heart surgery.
What I always try to tell people about that day is that there were so many heroes that day. So many heroes. Helping each other down the stairs and out into the lobbies. And it was a day when we needed heroes, and many of them showed up. Did we get everything right? Probably not. Did we do the best we could? Yeah.
All right, so the lead session is about to end, so just in closing, want to add a few remarks. This is the stories they tell. If you're interested, this is a voicemail a husband left to his wife. He was on the plane. He had learned of the attacks. It's a really powerful message he left, encouraging her to, you know, do good things, have good times. There's many stories such as this one. If you're interested in learning it.
Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked, if things don't go well and it's not looking good, I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. Go have a good time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I'll see you later. Hi, babe. Hope I call you.
So I encourage you to look at these resources if you'd like to learn more. The National September 11th Memorial Museum, which is in New York City. You could go to this link to learn more about what is there. And also the Flight 93 National Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where you can learn about the heroes who overtook those hijackers. And in order to prevent more casualties, they yeah, they were heroes. So the impacts of 9/11, of which there were many, so national security and policy changes, there's the Patriot Act, Homeland Security, airport security now through the Transportation Security Administration, and the impacts are far and wide: military and foreign policy, the economic impacts, you could read more about it, the trauma and grief that many people experienced, the changes in public perception and behavior, increased vigilance or watching. So yeah, in closing today, we remember the victims who tragically passed on September 11, 2001. I feel that it's important for us to do every year to honor them and learn from them and learn from the resolve of Americans who were heroes that day. Many stories of first responders helping people out of buildings, ordinary people just helping others so that they could get out of the building, and many heroes who perished in these attacks. All right, thank you all for attending as enrichment to learn more about September 11th. Have a nice day.